Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, I talk about free agent Carlos Rodon as a potential pickup for the Dodgers. So that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. I'm Vince Samperio, Chavez Fiends, rolling solo dolo today. Jeff and I have been splitting up a lot this offseason, just taking care of business on our own end. So I'll be here today talking about Carlos Rodon, a potential pickup for the Dodgers. One of the only arms available starting pitching wise that the Dodgers should even really consider, or that would have a bigger impact on the team other than being a number 4 or 5 starter. So I'm going to get into all that. But before, I just want to once again remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. I guess not every weekday morning, but every morning, whenever you can. We are free and available on all platforms. So go check us out. And let's get into it. Carlos Rodon is a free agent. There is still an MLB lockout. No new news on that front. No new news on the Dodgers front. Not a lot going on right now. And we kind of figured that with the holiday coming up, or the holidays coming up, won't get much traction on anything until 2022. And that's how it goes when you're in a lockout and there's nothing else to get into. But for us, the Dodgers are preparing for post-lockout. And post-lockout, there's still a lot of holes on this team that they need to fill. And the main hole being that one of starting pitching. And I do think, I honestly believe Andrew Friedman has a plan and has plan B, C, D, all the way to Z. I don't know where his plan sat in terms of free agent starting pitching before. I felt like guys like Robbie Ray or even Kevin Gausman weren't had at ridiculous prices that the Dodgers could have maybe jumped in there. They didn't, and they kind of went after Scherzer, and after Scherzer, we didn't really hear them linked to any of the other big names, Stroman or Gausman or even Syndergaard, like I said, Robbie Ray. They weren't really linked to him. All those guys went somewhere else, and now the Dodgers are sitting with not a lot of free agent starting pitching left, with a premium on trading for starting pitching, which we've talked about before, with the A's and Reds being the two teams that have the arms that could significantly help the Dodgers, but that cost could have gone up because other teams, the Dodgers aren't desperate, but they are more desperate than they were before, I guess, and I would never expect Friedman to overpay anyways, but, they are sitting in a role. And when it comes to starting pitching, before I even get into Rodon, there's a very big possibility or chance that Andrew Friedman believes in Ryan Pepiot, believes in Andre Jackson, believes in, maybe Bobby Miller coming up at some point. He believes in those guys to give the Dodgers, Mitch White. He believes in the Dodgers to give those guys, or to give them quality enough innings. And it's one of those where, let's assume Clayton Kershaw comes back and you got Buehler, Julio, Kershaw, Heaney, and then you have Gonsolin, Price, White, Pepiot, Jackson, Miller to give you either that fifth starter or give you options throughout the year to eat some innings. And then Friedman goes about it that way and does a deal at the deadline for somebody. And more teams, more players might emerge at the deadline than there are right now. As of right now, every team would think they have a chance at the playoffs or at least at competing. And it's a lot easier to trade at the deadline when teams maybe want to sell off some pieces or get rid of guys that are having career years that are maybe going to be free agents, whatever the case is. So I do think that it's very possible in the realm that Andrew Friedman thought, I think we have enough to get us through. I think our offense should put up enough runs. I think our bullpen's one of the best in the league. And I think we can get by with this starting pitching for now. And if it crashes and burns early in the year, maybe we're going to have to pay a little out of pocket to go get somebody to help. But if it doesn't, then we can, sit back and wait and see what emerges around the July trade deadline and go get somebody to help us out. So I'm not crossing off that as a possibility. I do think that they believe in obviously the arms that they have in their farm system. I talked about Mitch White last week, and we saw Mitch White. He pitched well enough to, a 3.66 ERA. Obviously, that was over the course of some interesting outings, a couple short outings, a couple spot starts, or a couple of times being the starter, but coming in after an opener. So, guys like him, like Samperio, Andre Jackson looked decent in his time up in the big leagues, and he could be a guy that contributes. So I do think that's one of the possibilities that's up there, assuming Clayton Kershaw comes back. Now, we don't know. I'm worried about this lockout maybe changing Kershaw's thoughts a little bit. Like, you know what, I like being home with the kids. They just had their fourth child, and maybe my baseball time has come up. Although I do think that the competitor that he is, the way he went out last year, I don't think that would allow him to do that. But you never know what's going to happen. But I do think starting pitching front, that the Dodgers, they do need starting pitching, but I do think that they could get by hoping that their offense puts up runs, hoping that their bullpen is very strong, or knowing that their bullpen is very strong, and that they could get by with what they have now. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Carlos Rodon. So I'm going to keep talking about Carlos Rodon right after I talk about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar in the world. And guess what? The new year's coming up. And you know what that means? New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, you need Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar and makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which are chalky, waxy, or don't taste great, Built Bars are basically a candy bar that can help you out in keeping your resolutions, and they're covered in 100% chocolate, and they got low calories, low sugar, low carbs, high protein, everything you could want in a great tasting protein bar. So here's an idea for your new year. Clear out everything you got, clear out all that sugary and calorie filled treats, replace them with Built Bars, feel better about your new year, and get started right. So go to built.com right now, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Okay, let's start talking about Carlos Rodon. He was on the White Sox last year, was one of the best pitchers in baseball, then had some injury issues and ended up only throwing 130 innings on the season. But in those 130 innings, he had a .96 whip, a 2.37 ERA, 13-5 record, if you care about that, 185 strikeouts and 132.2 innings. So he was legit. And you take a look at his baseball savant page, and there is a lot of bright, dark red. He had one of the best strikeout percentages, whiff percentages, his expected ERA, expected batting average, expected slugging percentage, all top tier. None of his pitches are necessarily anything crazy. His velocity was higher than normal for him, but not necessarily anything ridiculous. He doesn't have that much spin on his fastball, all that stuff. But regardless of that, he was really good, and he had some of the best numbers of his career in terms of everything I mentioned: strikeout percentage, expected ERA, expected slugging, expected batting average. And he missed, he got a lot of strikeouts. And this guy he would come to the Dodgers with 4 pitches, although it's really only 3 pitches, with four-seamer, slider, changeup. He does have a curveball, but he hardly ever throws it. He's mostly fastball, slider. The changeup only makes up about 12% of his pitches, or at least so far in his career. But, with the Dodgers, that could change. Maybe they see something, they like something, and he could end up having a little bit different mix. But based on what he did last year, and based on how much better it was than normal, I don't expect that to happen too much. The biggest concern, I'll start with concerns about Carlos Rodon. One is injuries. Obviously, he was injured last year. He had never been as good as he was last year in the past. So that's always a little bit of a concern. But he has been consistently, decent to a certain extent. He'd come in and be the Dodgers 3, 4, 5 starter, depending on Kershaw and depending if they make any other moves. So you can do a lot worse for a number 4 or 5 starter, but he, hasn't pitched as much as you might like in his career, and um, that's the main concern. Obviously, the main concern is that. But I do think, depending on price, he's probably going to be a little more expensive. But we've seen what the Dodgers have done with pitchers. Rich Hill is the main one where they signed him knowing that they're not going to get 200 innings out of this guy. They're going to get 100, 150 innings at the most, but they're going to be really, really good. And that's kind of, I guess, what you would expect with Rodon. You're going to get 100, 150 innings that are really good. And that's what you can hope for. You just would hope that you can keep him healthy enough to help you in October, because it wouldn't matter if he gives you all those innings. I mean, it would help, obviously, in the regular season, have those innings to get you into October. But once you get to October, you kind of need him there to make it worth it. So that's the concern with Rodon. The other concern comes more from sample size and seeing, was last year a mirage or was last year legit? The biggest thing with last year is the four-seam fastball. The four-seam fastball was higher last year than ever in his career. By not a significant amount, but just as early as 2019, his average four-seamer was 91.4. 2020, it went up to 92.8, but then in 2021, it jumped up to 95.4. The one thing I will say is that back in 2019, he was throwing a sinker, and that was averaging 95.4, and had sat in the 93, 94 range for most of his career. So it's not completely out of the realm that he was throwing that much harder. The interesting thing is that he was throwing all his pitches harder last year than ever before. His slider was up to 85.8 average after being 83.4, and after topping out 87, but that was back in 2015. His changeup, topping out at 85.1 a few years ago, was at 85.2 last year. So it's a matter of, how did he get the velocity back up? And is that something that contributed to not being able to get through the whole season? And that's what, the questions they would ask, the things they would look at in a free agent pitch, or when they're talking to him, what did you do to get yourself up velocity wise? And what did you do differently? And do you think that contributed to an injury? And I guess the concern would be, what if he goes back down to averaging 91.4 on his fastball? Is he going to be as good as he was in 2021? And, realistically, and he probably won't, because it's not like his other pitches got ridiculously better. The fastball was the main thing that got significantly better. He started using it a lot more, and then it resulted in, like I said, one of the best seasons of his career. So that's the concerns about it. Obviously the other concern would just be money and how much he commands. Now, if Robbie Ray, who won Cy Young last year, he's only getting 25 mil a year. Kevin Gausman, who's been really good and had a resurgence last few years, he's getting around 23, 25 mil a year. You'd imagine Rodon's going to be 20 mil a year or less. And that's something the Dodgers should be comfortable with for a guy like this. Like I said, paying him for his peak. You're paying him for his peak. And, Rich Hill was getting 16 mil a few years ago, knowing, like I said, that he wasn't going to be throwing 200 innings. He wasn't going to be a guy that you need to have every fifth day, but he was a guy that you wanted to have throw, 2-3 times a month at the very least. Now, I don't think they're, Rodon and Rich Hill aren't comparable in that sense. Like, he's not a broken guy, but he's also never thrown more than 28 games, started more than 28 games in a year. And that was back in 2016 when he did that. Since 2016, last year was his year with the most starts, and that was 24. So that's, the injury concern keeps back in there, and depending how much you're paying him and what the deal is. So the non-concern about that is that the Dodgers aren't going to pay him what they don't believe he's worth. And if they think he's worth 2 years at 40-45 mil, who are we to tell them no? Who are we to say they're not? But realistically, I think they could get him a little cheaper than that, and that's where the value of Rodon comes in, getting him a little cheaper than maybe some of these other guys. Obviously, you're not paying for damaged goods, but you're paying for what you've seen and the durability you've seen and what you're going to get, and I think that's where it really sits. And now the other concern is, like I said, 2.37 ERA last year. ERAs his entire career from 2015, 3.75, 4.04, 4.15, 4.18, 5.19, 8.22. Wasn't good. He was a free agent, and the White Sox just ended up picking him back up. 1-year deal, and then this happened. So, there's a lot of question marks there. Numbers that were significantly better than his entire career in FIP, in WHIP, in strikeouts, in everything. And that's, I guess, the main concern. But with concerns, there's the flip side. There's the positives, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But first, I'm going to talk about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before, as football continues its march through bowl season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline is your number one spot for all sports action this season, and you can check it all out on their brand new, beautiful website. Head there on your laptop or mobile device and sign up today. And if you put a deposit, you can get a 50% welcome bonus on that deposit with the promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline has you covered for all the sports in the 2021 season. So don't wait to take advantage of all those amazing offers. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's finish this one up with some positives and what Carlos Rodon could bring to the Dodgers. And it's what he did in 2021. That's the positive. That's what the Dodgers should be intrigued by, and that's what would help the Dodgers, and that's what would give them a formidable rotation, regardless of who else they bring back or who else they sign or anything like that. Because, like I said, 24 starts, 132 innings, 185 strikeouts, not only a 2.37 ERA, but a 2.65 FIP, which means he wasn't pitching ridiculously above what he was doing, a .957 WHIP. The guy was an all-star, finished 5th in Cy Young, and that's mostly because, like I said, the injury took him out toward the end of the season. But that's what should get you excited. And you kind of, you play that game as the Dodgers. You play that game. Hey, he has injury history. Hey, we're going to get him cheaper than some of these other premier guys that already signed. But also, hey, we could get this. And that's where the intrigue comes in. And that's where he brings the most to the Dodgers. The one, I guess, real quick other concern is that he is left-handed. The Dodgers already have at least 2 left-handers with Julio and Heaney. They bring back Kershaw, that's another left-hander, and then you got 4 left-handers in Buehler, which I don't think is a big deal, but people will talk about it if that was the case. The Dodgers have had a mix before of righties and lefties, and too many righties and too many lefties. And at the end of the day, if you're a good pitcher, you're a good pitcher, especially starting pitching. You got to be able to throw to both sides, and that's just the reality of being a starting pitcher. So that which hand you throw with shouldn't be a big concern. What else does Rodon bring? He brings, like I said, a guy that gives you all he's got every 5th day, and maybe not every 5th day, as I mentioned with the injuries, but when he does bring it, he's going to bring it to you. And he's a guy that obviously getting, I would imagine, smarter with age, and a guy that obviously works hard because after having one of the worst years of his career, or after having only thrown 11 games in 2019, 2020 combined, came back and had the year that he had in 2021. So you're getting a guy that obviously works hard, that wants to be good, that wants to take advantage. And you can't even really say, well, it was a contract year. I know, because he just had a contract year before that, and he didn't do that. So, contract year didn't really mean too much in 2020. So, it's not like, and regardless of what it is, he's not going to get a 5-6 year deal. He's going to get at most a 4-year deal, not from the Dodgers, but at most in the market, he's going to get a 4-year deal. Realistically, with the Dodgers, he'd probably get a 1 or 2 year deal. And hey, a 1 year prove it deal, another contract deal, work hard and go earn some more money. But, in terms of intangibles, that's what you can just tell from the outside. I have never seen anything negative about him. I've also, I guess, never seen anything positive about him in terms of his teammates and everything else. But for you to struggle in the majors, for you to struggle with injuries, and for you to continue to persevere and get through it and get better and, turn your career around in a season, that's some kind of determination and some kind of, strength right there. There's strength in that. And he's relatively young. He's only 29. He just turned 29 in December. Even if you sign him 1 year deal, he still would be able to get back on the market and get some money. If you sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal or a 2 year deal with an option, he's essentially in the prime. I know the prime of baseball players' careers is kind of shifting the last few years and maybe skewing a little younger, but realistically, this is still the prime of his career. And why not bet on a guy that worked hard, got back, and is in the prime of his career? So I do think that he brings a lot of, intrigue for sure, value for sure. If they can get him in the, under 22 mil a year, that there's value there if he's under 22 mil a year. And a guy that gives the Dodgers a formidable, a more formidable rotation. I know I started off the show talking about that they could get by what they have, but that's not necessarily what I want for them to do, and that's not necessarily something that they should be leaning into. You go get a guy like Rodon, and realistically, you're not expecting 30 starts from him. You're expecting 20, 25 starts. That still leaves you about 5 to 7 starts that you need out of guys like Pepio, Jackson, Mitch White, stuff like that. So he's a guy that, like I said, you can monitor. I'm assuming, I don't think he's a guy like Max Scherzer, I need the ball every 5th day or, whatever the case is. I don't think he's going to be one of those guys. Obviously, every starting pitcher wants the ball every 5th day, but I do think he would be open to exploring options of how to keep him healthy throughout the year and make sure he's pitching and being valuable to the team in October, as well as being valuable throughout the year. So that's what Rodon brings. It's cheaper than other guys, but could be very valuable. Lengthens that rotation and gives Dodgers help because realistically, they need help at starting pitching position. So talking through this, it's easy to see his name and be like, oh yeah, the Dodgers should go after him because he is, like I said, the really, other than Kershaw, he's really the only big name guy that can significantly upgrade your rotation left available, at least in terms of free agency. And the big thing right now with free agency is it only costs you money. And if the Dodgers aren't able to get anyone during free agency, they have to go the trade route. Well, now you have to give up assets. And while the Dodgers farm system continues to be, top tier of the league, always top half for sure, top 10 usually, and guys coming through, I do think that at some point, you can't always rely on it. You can't always expect to replenish the well. Now, obviously, as a Dodger fan, I hope that they always replenish well, and I hope it's always running, rampant and freely and being a top 10 farm system. But, as we saw last year, it ran dry a little bit in terms of talent ready to help the major league team. And the Dodgers were kind of out of luck in terms of guys they could call up and help. They didn't have anybody to do that. Now they're back in a place where they do have guys like that. They have guys like Bush and even maybe, Miguel Vargas, maybe late 2022, early 2023. They got guys that are going to be able to help out offensively. They've definitely got guys that are going to be They definitely got guys that are going to end up, helping out pitching wise and I don't necessarily think they need to go into that. Luis Castillo, yes, that's a guy that you give up some assets for because he's essentially a number one. He might not be a number one for the Dodgers, but he's a number one pitcher, starting caliber pitcher. Okay, you give up some assets for that. But, Sonny Gray, that's not necessarily someone I want to give up crazy assets for. Even any of the pitchers from the A's, Bassett, Montas, they all have stuff good enough to be maybe a number one on a bad team. I don't think they have the stuff to be number one on a good team. I definitely don't think they have better stuff than Buehler or maybe even Julio. So it's a matter of, do you want to give up that much for a guy that's going to be a number 3 or 4 starter? I don't know. But with a guy like Rodon, free agency is just money. And if you give him a short contract, it's only 2 or 3 years of money. So that's where I'm sitting. That's where I'm at. I like Carlos Rodon. Dodgers, go get him after the lockout is over, and give us a post lockout gift. As I think about it, go give me a post lockout gift. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for checking in with us and always being here. Thank you for making us your first listen every weekday morning. That's when we are here every Monday through Friday. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. You can also find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. If you're watching this on YouTube, I didn't change the color back to blue, so it looks teal. But we are on Twitter and Instagram, Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Samperio. If you want to call and leave us a voicemail or send us a text, you can do so at 323-863-5625 or send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Take your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.